If you're watching this, you probably noticed that most tutorials are for beginners only, leaving those who are just beyond beginner level clueless. This video is different. I will talk you through everything from the bare basics to the advanced use cases, with examples and clear logic behind each one. By the end, there shouldn't be a single question left unanswered. So to quickly explain the syntax side of things. The range function is a pretty simple function. It can accept up to 3 arguments. The start value is optional. It is an inclusive integer which specifies the position that the range function will start at. The stop value is a required value. It is exclusive, meaning it is not included. So if you put the number 10 as a stop value, it will go up until number 9, not including 10. Both the start and stop value can be a negative, and so can the step value. The step value is how many numbers it skips. If the step value was 5, then it will do 0, 5, 10, 15 up until the stop value. If the stop value is 24, it would stop at 20, as that is the nearest 5. And as you can see, all of these can be a negative number, which means
everything can be negative.
Now, the range function is a lazy sequence, meaning it does not actually store anything. It just increments the data as you loop over it. If we named a variable x and had it equal to a range function, x wouldn't be whatever the range function's arguments is. X will just be the range function. So if you print it out, you won't get a series of numbers, you will just get the function back. You should definitely understand how range works in theory now for the practical cases I'm about to show. As always, I will start off with the basics before going into the more complicated side of things. This is the most basic example where I is a placeholder for a number. We start off at 0, so I is 0. It is then printed out. The end equals spacebar part just means that when it is printed out, it leaves a gap next to it for the next iteration. Then I becomes 2. It does not become 1, as 2 on the end of the range function tells it to iterate in 2's. That is the step value. 0 plus 2 is 2. So I becomes 2 and is printed. This is repeated until it reaches 10. Remember that the middle value is exclusive, so it would never reach 11, even if the step value was 1. As mentioned earlier, the numbers in the range function can be negative. To start off simple, this first example just includes the start and end values. The start value is minus 10, so from minus 10 it starts iterating down to 0. But as the end is exclusive, it stops at minus 1. But what if the step was negative? Here we count from 0 to minus 10 without a step value. This code would result into a logic error, as nothing would happen and the program would effectively skip it. This is because with the absence of a step value, Python interprets the step as 1. So it will count up, not down. With minus 3, it counts down in 3's. If it was minus 1, it will count down in 1's. But what if only this step was a negative? Well, you would have effectively reversed the process. What's happening here is we are starting from 10 and ending at 0. As seen before, this wouldn't work without the negative step as we're counting down. If you want to count down without negatives, you can use the reverse function. However, make sure the start is lower than the end, otherwise you will face a logic error. And remember, the end is exclusive even when using reverse, meaning the start would be 1 lower than the end. In this case, as the step is 2, it is 10 take away 2, so it starts off at 8 and ends at 2. So it starts off at 8 and ends at 0. As you've likely seen before, you can put strings inside a range function. It works quite similar as it would with numbers. For the first example, we're just using the string blah, which has 4 letters. As it is a string, we have to use a length function which returns the length of a given string. What's happening here is the same as before. It starts off at 0. For that iteration, I is treated as 0. Then it is 1, then 2, then 3. It does not include 4, as 4 is the end value. If you have a string which is 6 letters long, then get the length of that string, the result would be 6. When you put that into the range function, what's effectively happening is, by default, the start value is 0. So it iterates from 0 up to but not including 6. This gives a number line 0 to 5. As before, you can change the start value and the step value, as all Python sees when you have a len string is the length of that string. So if the start value is 3 and the length of the string is 4, you will effectively be doing range start is 3 and end is 4. So only 3 gets printed out. Similarly, with a step value, you will be skipping over numbers based on that value. Here, the word silver has a length of 6. We're starting from 2 and using 2 as a step, so only 2 and 4 are printed. 5 cannot be printed as the step does not allow it, and 6 cannot be printed as it is the end value, which is exclusive. The last 3 basic things you can do with range and string is use it as indexing. Here we have the word coding, which is 6 characters long. On each iteration, we are getting a word, only using the value being iterated over and printing it. So the first letter is uppercase C. As such, I is equal to 0. Don't see the word in the range function as a word, it is a number. That number is 6. We are printing out the 0 index of the word coding, which is C. Repeating that process with no gap gives us the same word back in this example. But in an actual use case, you might be trying to manipulate a letter or use a specific letter in some way instead of just printing it back out. For the last example in this section, a variable is used instead, but it works the same way. As the end part of the statement has a gap, the outputted word will have a gap in between them as well. Now, in case you are unfamiliar with dictionaries, they are a data structure that holds a key value pair. In this case, the keys are A, B, C, with the respective values 1, 2, 3. Usually, to extract a key value from a dictionary, you have a basic for loop as shown. Below is just to show how range works with a dictionary, as a level footing for the examples ahead. It also shows how the list works with range. To use range, we first make a list of all the keys. The length in this case is 3. The start of the iteration is when I is equal to 0, so we're accessing the 0 index of the list. In this case, it is the letter A. Then we're accessing the corresponding value to that key. Hopefully you understand the bare basics of a dictionary and how the range function interacts with it. You should be ready for more realistic use case between range and dictionaries. In this first example, we have a dictionary called options, which contains keys, apple, banana, and cherry with the respective values. The purpose I'm about to show is using the range function to display various options to the user. Of course, this will be text-based as I'm not using a GUI. But if you are using a library such as Pygame, this is the fundamental knowledge needed to display the options in a drop-down menu. Like previously, we put all the keys into a list, which I've called keys. For the for loop itself, it's just a modified version of what I've shown previously. It uses f strings to display both the index and the key. From there, the user picks an option and gets a value, which in this case is a number but could be a whole manner of things. In this example, I'm using range with a dictionary to access previous elements to show the change between them. We have a list of cells corresponding to months, which is also inside the list. The range counts from 1 to the length of that list. Starts at 1 as the point of this code is to calculate the difference between months. If the start was at 0, there will be no previous value for January. The first line in the for loop is for the previous month, grabbing I, which is currently 1, and subtracting it from 1 to get 0. January is on the 0 index in the list of months. The current month is February, as February sits on the first index. It then goes to the dictionary and accesses the value of the current month, subtracting it from the previous. A fancy f string later, and you get the change. During research, I found that every case where I can use the range with zip, enumerate creates cleaner code. Dare I say it, any case advanced enough can be created better with some other function, is what I would say if matrices weren't a thing. Ignore the fact that if you need to use a matrix using code, you're probably smart enough to be comfortable around for loops. A matrix in Python is just a 2D list used to represent a mathematical object. I won't get into the maths, but I'll explain how to iterate through it using the range function. The matrix arranged like this represents a mathematical concept better than a long row. Here you can see 3 columns and 3 rows represented by 3 lists inside one list called matrix. This works the exact same as before. The I starts off at 0 and will iterate to the length of the matrix. The matrix is only 3 long because it only has 3 lists. I will iterate from 0 to 2 as it is 0 at first. The 0 index will be used, so the very first list within that list, the 0 index is also used. In this case, that number will be 1. Then when I is number 1, the first index is used, which is the second list. Within that second list, it's the first index. In this case, the number 5. The process repeats. Once it's done, it sums up the total. So 1 add 5 add 9, which is 15. Now this is all well and good until you try and apply it to a project. So below I'm going to show something which is a bit more realistic. What you see is some example I got ChatGPT to make up. But but it's what you would realistically be using matrices for in terms of complexness. I had to use it during my coursework to procedurally generate a disjointed maze. Here we're using the range function to iterate through each part of the matrix, which represents a grid, from which we set it as active or empty based on some condition. The function works the same. We iterate from 0 to a given amount. That amount is based on the amount of rows. Same with the columns. Then, if some condition is true, we'll use the index to set that cell as active. The compressed for loop above uses range to generate this matrix, making sure the value of each cell is empty by default. From 0 to whatever the value cols is, that's how much each list inside the 2D list will search out for. It is how long every list's length is. How many lists in total is set by the 4x in range rows bit. If I go on any further, this will be a tutorial on matrices and grid building, but hopefully this helps you understand the basics. The final part of this tutorial is what I like to call advanced basics. It's just another use case that you might run across. If you had to fill a list or other data structure with numbers, you can use the range to generate such a thing. As you can see, this creates a list of numbers from 1 to 10. If I added a step of 2, only odd numbers will be on the list. The first example is just a for loop with comprehension. You saw it in the last part with the matrix. What's happening is, for every integer from 0 to 20 with 2 as a step, we're passing that integer into the list. If we wanted to square each number, the 2 asterisks means that for every integer passed in, set by the for loop, it is squared before added to the list. So at first, I is equal to 0. So I is passed through, squared and added. Then I is equal to 2, which is passed, squared and added. Next up introduces Boolean. If the front number can be generated by the range function, it returns true. Otherwise, it returns false. Lastly, we can store the range function inside a variable. Remember that it's a lazy function, so you're not actually storing the range of numbers like a list would. But what that allows you to do is manipulate its parameters. Originally, it would iterate from 0 to 9. Now it iterates from 2 to 4. From here, you can put it into a list if you so desire. Now this is all well and good, especially because the range function is a basic function that a beginner often learns as an add-on to data structures and for loops. But for more complicated structures, methods, and functions, a tutorial isn't going to cut it. You need to learn through projects. Conveniently, I have a series where I work through programming projects and other series where I work through challenges in Code Wars. I hope this video helped, and if something was unclear or uncertain, feel free to question it below in the comments.